Welcome back to the MPL Weekly. I don't know if you caught it, but we played our own Teferi Time Raveler there and added 2 more minutes to the clock. Gotcha. I'm Becca Scott, here with Brian Kibler.
Hello.
And Steve Sunu.
Hey, how's it going?
And we're just recapping the week's Magic Pro League matches and going over, checking out these different divisions. We're down to our last division of the day. And at 4 Pacific time, we're going to switch on back over to the coverage of the Magic Online Championship. So make sure you stay tuned for that. All right. So what have we seen today that made you very excited?
Lot of Bant mid-range. Really, really love that deck. Loving seeing it perform. I think it's got one of the coolest concepts in the field this week.
Yeah, and I think as much as it's not necessarily a style of deck that I'm a big fan of, I think Brad's performance with the Bant Nexus deck in that last match was pretty phenomenal. He piloted that in a lot of very intricate, complicated situations, and I think very well, and managed to find a win when he had his back against the wall multiple times.
Yeah, Bant Nexus just became one of my favorite decks to watch played.
Ooh, you're the only one.
Speaking of to watch, not to play.
I stand by my statement.
Speaking of my list of favorites, we're about to watch a match from one of my favorite players because he finds a way of communicating through the cards. That sassy, wry humor. You can almost see his hat spinning. We're about to go into, let's check out the head-to-head with Burchett and Piotr Glogowski.
Yeah, Burchett, 2-time English national champion, notably winner of the first ever Mythic Championship in Cleveland this year. Very, very appropriate that they are in the Sapphire division because their deck this week is, of course, Mono Blue Tempo.
Yeah, last week they played a Mono Red deck, I believe, which was sort of took people as a surprise, I think, especially considering their success and really mastery over Mono Blue Tempo. And Blue wasn't really a deck we saw much of this week, but I think a lot of Autumn's fans are going to be happy they brought it again this week. On the other side of the table, Becca's favorite, right. Piotr Canister, as he is known, who is a very, very entertaining player to watch. Whether it's his sort of emoting and clicking around the board during the game to show you what he's thinking. He had, I think, our match of the week, our play of the week last week. With his hostage taker, deputy detention, all kinds of nonsense.
He was the Brad Nelson
coming
of last
back
week.
from One Life, right? So I'm really excited to see how this match plays out because he's actually playing the exact same deck he chose to play last week, at least in terms of the archetype.
Well, and he's also playing against a favorite deck of his, which was the Mono Blue Tempo that he was the only person to bring to the Mythic Invitational. And let's go ahead and look at Autumn's deck here.
All right, pretty standard Mono Blue Tempo list for Burchett. It's very, very close to the list that they used to win the Mythic Invitational Cleveland, I believe.
Oh, Mythic Championship.
Sorry, Mythic
the
Championship
first of the
in
year.
Cleveland. Yes, of course.
It's worth noting there's more than one island in this deck.
Yes.
But I actually saw a post from Autumn on social media where they said that they were sad there were only 18 unique island arts available on Arena because they like to play with mismatched arts for all of them. And there's one of each of those islands in the deck. I think there's 2 of a single copy, but I think that's why we have a 1X island showing up here on Arena.
Yeah, I actually
very
streamlined
deck outside of the arts used for the lands, which drive me crazy.
Now, I believe this is the first week that we've seen Mono Blue Tempo in the MPL. Brian, what is the game plan behind this deck?
So Mono Blue Tempo is really built around primarily getting down an early, usually evasive creature, whether a Terramander, Siren Storm Tamer, protecting it with dive down, spell pierce, counter magic in general, and hopefully sticking a Curious Obsession on it. So you can keep connecting and drawing cards and getting damage in, and then stopping your opponent from doing whatever they want to do with your counter magic like Quench, Negate, etc.
Tempest Gen is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
That's going to give you more power each time you get a land on the board.
Yeah, Tempest Gen is the heavy hitter of this deck. Most of what this deck does is relatively sort of small here and there. It ramps up as the game goes on, whether through Tempest Gen and playing islands or through Terramander and getting that adapt ability reduced in cost. And suddenly your little 1/1 flyer, it was once adorable, is now a 5/5 and crushing your opponent.
Now let's hop on over to Glogowski's Esper midrange.
Like you said, Brian, very, very similar to the deck that Glogowski brought last week.
There are a few distinct changes here. One notable inclusion is the Elite Guard Mage, which was not included last week. And you look at it, you're like, oh, this looks like a draft card, right? It's a 2/3 flyer for 4 with flying, When it enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life and draw a card. And crucially, this is just kind of another utility-style creature that is a multicolor card, so it enables Hero of Precinct 1. Gives you a little bit more evasion, so you don't just get a clogged up ground. Because this deck is very good at holding off opponents on the ground with the tokens from Hero of Precinct 1, but sometimes the ground gets clogged up with all those little creatures, and you just want a little bit of flying damage in addition to the Thief of Sanity, and it looks like Piotr has gone toward Elite Guard Mage to get that.
Also, of course, replaces itself with the card.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Well, 2 very interesting decks and 2 awesome, awesome players. Excited to see how this goes down. So let's jump right into the gameplay.
Let's go.
All right, we're going to start off with Glogowski on the bottom, Burchett on top. Glogowski going to immediately mulligan the first hand into a 2-lander with an Elite Guard Mage, a Search for Azcanta, Thought Erasure, and Vraska's Contempt. Isolated Chapel going to the bottom on the scry. Burchett, Curious Obsession, Opt, Chart a Course, and Wizard's Retort with 3, of course, islands.
Yeah, Burchett does not currently have any early game creatures to get the Curious Obsession on and going, but this is not a deck that has to be aggro. It doesn't have to play a sort of tempo game against a deck that doesn't necessarily have its own sort of early game going. It can play quite reactively. You can use your Wizard's Retorts and your other counter magic to stop what your opponent's sort of early game stuff is, or eventually get to your sort of powerful stuff and protect it. But this turn 2 Search for Azcanta makes that kind of plan a lot more difficult.
Spell Pierce found off the top from that Opt in response to the Search for Azcanta being cast for Burchett. Ugin the Ineffable on top with Search for Azcanta. Gonna bin it from Canister. We got an Isolated Chapel coming into play and a Thought Erasure going on the stack. And we're gonna see if Burchett is gonna use that Spell Pierce here.
Yeah, Spell Pierce is a card that gets worse, A, as the game progresses, and B, when your opponent knows about it. So Spell Pierce here taking care of the Thought Erasure. Opt giving Autumn a bit more of a look into their deck.
Tempest Djinn on top.
Okay.
Gonna go ahead and draw that Tempest Djinn, untap.
And Tempest Djinn or Terramander now. Terramander is also an option, though there's Terramander not a wizard, so it doesn't enable the retort. So yeah, we're just gonna see the bigger threat come down in the form of Tempest Djinn.
And as we mentioned, looks like he hasn't committed just yet. Or sorry, it looked like Autumn hasn't committed just yet. Was confusing the screens for Glogowski. Search for Azcanta, gonna mill a Teferi and
no
draw
land.
the Teferi. No land drop, meaning that all of Canister's cards are stranded in hand right now.
And now we see this deck doing what it wants to do. Autumn has the Curious Obsession on the Tempest Djinn with the Wizard Retort to back it up. And one of the weaknesses of Esper sometimes, whether mid-range or control, is that your cards cost a lot. And that's one of the ways that Mono Blue can sort of prey upon the Esper decks, is that if they don't have the cheap ways to remove those early creatures, and frankly the mid-range deck doesn't have the cast downs and things like that, at least not in the main deck, it can be a big problem because exactly this happens. You get one thing ahead, especially with a Curious Obsession. Yeah,
wow.
I'm gonna concede.
Scoop it up.
And that was a very quick concession from Canister there, recognizing that and he's played this deck before. He knows how this is going to play out if he's getting his spell countered, has no more removal in hand, and he just wants to go to game 2.
And it looks like that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going into sideboarding. Finale of Eternity coming in for Canister from the board. Got Ugin's going out, Teferi's going out, keeping the curve pretty low to mid-range here, Kibler.
Yeah, and that's a big part of what you need to do in order to combat the blue tempo deck, is you need to be able to present threats and have answers that you can sometimes do multiple times in a turn. It's one of the keys with Duress here. Duress allowing you to potentially strip the counter magic your opponent has that they're going to try and hold up to protect their creature. And when your removal spell is all stuff like Mortify, Oath of Kaya, it's really inefficient, and you really want to rely on cheaper stuff like those Moment of Cravings and Tyrant Scorns.
All right, looks like Canister has a game plan, but is maybe double checking a little bit just to make sure that everything's all set here. Search for Azcanta gonna go back to the sideboard.
Maybe come back.
Maybe come back. Oh, it comes back.
Just wants to hear the
wonderful waves of Azcanta. All set on both sides here. Burchett up a game. Canister up against the wall, has to win this one in order to continue the match. Canister going to play first. 4-land hand with a Hero Precinct 1 and 2. 2 multicolored spells. Burchett, 1 lander, gonna go ahead and keep it.
Burchett has an opt, which makes a 1-lane keep much closer to a 2-lane keep. Not exactly, but crucially, though, the Hero of Precinct 1 from Canister here, the mono blue tempo deck, while it is very good at playing games where it is ahead, it's not necessarily as good at playing games that it is behind, especially games where your opponent is going to be able to extend their lead turn after turn like Hero of Precinct 1 can do.
Burchett opts into an opt, does not find a second land on draw step.
Ooh,
Scries one to the
again,
bottom,
does
but
find another
find the
island.
land. Yeah. Canister has a lot of options here, and by a lot of options, I mean Thought Erasure.
I'm curious whether he chooses to actually play the Thought Erasure here because he knows that his opponent's deck is contains quite a few copies of Spell Pierce. And I think that there's a reasonable argument that you just want to hold back your Thought Erasure. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's exactly what he does. We've seen Canister make these heads-up plays before. No land for Burchett again. Gonna go ahead and discard a card to hand size at the end of turn.
And this is a recognition of, okay, well, if I could play a Merfolk Trickster, but then I'm totally shields down going into a possible 4-mana turn, and would prefer to hold up the Spell Pierces. But here we see Canister being very much rewarded for choosing to play around the Spell Pierce. Thought Erasure, go ahead and maybe get the Spell Pierce? No. He sees Spell Pierce number 2 as well, and a lot of redundancy. I'd be curious what he chooses to take here. I think Dive Down might be the selection that jumps out to me, if only because A, there's redundancy in everything else, and B, if your opponent does play a Tempest Djinn, say draws a land, plays Tempest Djinn, you want to be able to Deputy Detention it. Obviously, it needs to land, but Deputy Detention plays around Spell Pierce, but not Dive Down.
All right, so Canister thinking about it, deciding what to take with this Thought Erasure. Lots of options, but as you mentioned, Kipler, lots of redundancy. Do you try to cut down the redundancy, or do you take the card that is most likely to save their creature from a Deputy of Detention? Tempest Djinn.
Okay, gonna take a Djinn. Ooh, Duress on top. It doesn't proactively advance your game plan here. You know your opponent's spells are limited to the Dive Down and the 2 Spell Pierces right now, but obviously they could drop more.
It's also not a gold spell, so can't trigger Hero Precinct 1. So you'd be getting rid of a Dive Down or a Spell Pierce. Your opponent also doesn't really have any lands right now.
Sort of think about this more. Tempest Djinn's the only real threats in the hand, right? With the Hero of Precinct 1, the Merfolk Tricksters are almost irrelevant. And by taking just the 1 Tempest Djinn, ooh, you're going to attack. No.
Not into a Merfolk Trickster.
Yeah, I was like, I don't think so. I think that was Canister just kind of being cheeky and being like, haha, maybe no. Just saw the hand. I know I don't want to attack with this hero.
All right, Trickster's going to come in at the end of turn, tap down that Hero of Precinct 1. And that Trickster will connect. Burchett going to keep land up, having drawn that Essence Capture. Isolated Chapel is the draw for Canister.
Yeah, Thought Erasure number 2, something that's probably on your mind, but given that your opponent knows that you know about 2 Spell Pierces, I mean, do you want to use the Thought Erasure and maybe just get double Spell Pierced here? It does use your opponent's turn and 2 cards out of their hand, which are theoretically pretty powerful when you draw your more expensive stuff, like Teferi, for instance.
It also makes a 1/1 with Hero Precinct 1 and allows you to smooth out your draws with that Surveil, should it resolve.
And from Burchett's perspective, you're thinking, okay, well, I can use both Spell Pierces to protect, say, my other Tempest Djinn, or hide the information about my Essence Capture.
But they have to think about it, right? That is a 2-for-1.
Right. And you have to be concerned about your opponent having the sort of big spell stuff like Teferi that you're trying to keep them from playing. Though interestingly, we saw that Piotr removed most of his expensive planeswalkers, such as Teferi.
And I believe that Teferi went to the graveyard off of Thought Erasure earlier as well.
Yeah, both Ugins came out, and with at least 1 Teferi gone, Autumn decides, okay, I'm gonna use my Spell Pierces to fight over this, protect the rest of my hand. But the hero continuing to generate more stuff. Tempest Djinn could come down, but it is vulnerable to any kind of removal because there's no mana available for the dive down.
Well, with Canister having 3 unknown cards in hand, another isolated chapel, it's a lot of lands for Canister.
And this is the mid-range deck. It doesn't have any copies of Chemister's Insight to smooth your draws out in quite the same way.
All right, a Quench is the draw for Burchett.
Not quite as powerful when your opponent's flooding out.
Yeah. 2 Merfolk Tricksters on the board. Burchett considering an attack here. And ending the turn with Essence Capture, Quench, and Dive Down up. There's a Thief of Sanity.
Yeah, and the cards that Piotr knows about are Dive Down and Tempest Djinn. So Thief of Sanity is a card that makes a lot of sense to play. If that gets Essence captured, though, the Deputy Detention just can hit both Merfolk Tricksters and start the offense. That said, that leaves you open to your opponent playing a Tempest Djinn. But if you don't, if you get to that point and they just all land, well, that's Tempest Djinn Dive Down anyway.
All right, Canister is considering options, and it's going to go back to Burchett, looks like. Curious Obsession is the draw for Burchett.
It's sort of interesting. If you want, you can Curious Obsession one of these attack, and you have Dive Down. I don't think that's likely what you want to do. Mostly, Autumn is looking to draw a land, right? Just wants to be able to play the Tempest Djinn and have Dive Down up. Has yet to find one, however.
Going to trade off this Merfolk Trickster for the 2 tokens from
Oh
Hero.
dear, Teferi. Teferi's huge. Teferi shuts down so much. We see the
thinking about
get ready
the
to
emotes.
emote.
Nice.
Nice.
Oh boy. Going to keep the Teferi in hand.
Oh, Canister.
All right, well, we're going to see a Siren Storm Tamer come out from Burchett. Nice evasive creature for that Curious Obsession, should they so choose. Also has that awesome ability of being able to sacrifice itself for mana and essentially counter any spell that targets a creature they control. Hallowed Fountain is the draw for Canister.
I'm curious what Canister's game plan is here, because he drew an extra land, another land last turn, did not choose to play the Teferi. Teferi, I wonder if the plan is, okay, I'm gonna cast Deputy now. Deputy you sort of need to proactively deal with the Siren Storm Tamer because it protects Tempest Djinn anyway.
Right.
As long as it just stays in play. It's also just an evasive creature if there is a Curious Obsession around. And I think that we may see this Essence captured, which could lead to Teferi Time Raveler into bounce the Storm Tamer or the probably the Storm Tamer wherever the counter goes, just because you don't want the evasive creature to be in play.
Burchett thinking long and hard about this Essence capture here. Gonna commit to it. Essence capture with a counter on the Merfolk Trickster.
Yeah, and I like putting the counter on Trickster. It plays around removal effects on your Storm Tamer, which is already more valuable because of Curious Obsession. And if Teferi, say Teferi comes down and bounces something, well, if you bounce the Trickster, the Storm Tamer just kills it. But there's also the Thief of Sanity.
And that's 3 tokens.
Interesting. Not going to bounce anything. Just going to go. Just going to tick up. Okay. So Canister decides I'm going to protect this.
There's that land. Unfortunately, because of Teferi, that Dive Down will not be able to be cast at instant speed.
Yeah, the Teferi locking out the Dive Down is locking out the Dive Down and the Quench, and frankly a lot of Autumn's deck. Curious Obsession does mean that this threatens Teferi, but interestingly, the Curious Obsession, I believe, needs to damage a player. You can't damage a Planeswalker.
I believe that's correct,
so
yes.
Canister can actually just let this go through, at least in the Siren Stormtamer, and not trade the Thief of Sanity. Triple block the Merfolk Trickster, only lose 2 counters into Teferi, and still have a Thief of Sanity active with Teferi available to bounce even.
It looks like they're going to block. Looks like Canister's going to block here.
All right. I'm a little surprised by this, just because of the sheer value of Thief of Sanity. Because right now, Canister has an empty hand, right? If you trade here, you have a Hero of Precinct 1, but you have nothing to go with it. Obviously, you have Teferi 2. But I feel like maybe that allowing the Stormtamer to connect with Teferi might have. I guess if a Tempest Djinn comes down, you want to be able to have the ability to bounce, but you still would.
It's an interesting block for sure.
Yeah, I'm a little curious about that particular choice.
Moment of Craving is the draw for Canister, and of course another land off of the Teferi -3. Hero Precinct 1 going to get in there, bring Burchett down to 11. Tempest Djinn going to hit the battlefield once again, and that Teferi does not have the ability to bounce it anymore since it's at 2 loyalty.
It does not.
Canister going to go to the draw step. Second Hero Precinct 1, also not a multicolored spell.
We're going to see Hero attack here because it threatens the Moment of Craving for the trade.
And Autumn's not going to fall for it.
Not going to bite.
There's a second Hero of Precinct 1, plussing Teferi.
Don't worry, I got this.
And now it looks like Autumn's the one that's flooded a little bit here.
Well, I mean, this is not a bad creature to have in play to be flooded with, right? The Tempest Djinn is going to kill the Teferi and then threaten to just end the game in 2 attacks.
All right, so looks like Canister is trying to figure out whether they want to use the Moment of Craving here.
Moment of Craving would not protect the Teferi, right? It only goes to.
It would gain Canister 2 life,
right.
But the
Teferi
Teferi
still
would
dies.
die. Interesting.
I'm really curious about the past few plays Canister made.
Third Hero of Precinct 1 drawn for Canister.
I guess the idea is that there's a dive down in the hand, so you're not going to be able to use it anyway.
Right.
So you might as well get your life now, and if your opponent doesn't draw land, they don't have a 2-turn lethal clock with the Tempest Djinn.
Well, and here's the thing, right?
Yeah,
if they don't draw a creature, Autumn can't
actually
attack
really
with
good.
Tempest Djinn.
It's actually really good, right? Because now, because of that Moment of Craving, this Tempest Djinn is not very threatening. I mean, it's still threatening, but it's not 2-turn lethal threatening, and your opponent can't attack you unless they draw a creature anyway.
Watery Grave is the draw for Canister this turn. Once again, not a gold spell, multicolored spell. Got Tempest Djinn on Autumn
Canister
Burchett's
attacks
side.
with both, or all 3 rather. Yeah, puts Autumn down to just 1 life. Tempest Djinn eats 1. Autumn needs to draw something, or just the 2 Hero of Precinct 1s represent lethal damage next turn.
All right, let's see what the draw step is. It is an island, and that's not going to do it.
Whew. Yeah, a handful of counter magic, but that is going to do it. Autumn just kind of stalled out a little bit there on mana, and despite Canister, having a little bit of a flood himself, wasn't really able to get things done. So evens up the series at 1 game apiece.
And now we're going to go to sideboards. We look at Burchett. Got Eternal Kefnet in the sideboard there, and Trancing Melody in the sideboard. Burchett is going to make some considerations here.
Yeah, we saw just how much the Teferi Time Raveler really shut down a lot of elements of their deck, and I'm curious to see if there's a sort of alternate course to having quite as much. Obviously the Wizard's Retorts are great. The Spell Pierces, Canister's playing around them pretty effectively, but they are more powerful on the play. Though it looks like Autumn is choosing to actually remove 1 of them.
Wow. Well, of course, Autumn is a master at mono blue. This, once again, is the deck that they piloted to victory at Mythic Championship 1 in Cleveland. And we have some new sideboard cards coming in for more of the Spark, most notably that God Eternal Kefnet.
Those island piles are pretty funny to me.
I love it.
1, 2. I'm like exactly the opposite. I want them all to be the same. I want them to be my favorite picture. But I can respect an embrace of chaos.
Well, let's see if that embrace pays off for them. We're going into game 3 of Canister versus Autumn Burchett. Once again, Burchett at the top of your screen, Glogowski at the bottom. We're going to see a 3-land hand with 2 Teferi Time Raveler, a Duress, and Elite Guard Mage. That's a snap keep for Canister. Burchett mulligan down to 6 with a hand with a Siren Stormtamer.
No, I think so.
Oh, no,
no. Just
right.
played it out
It was on
really
the stack.
fast.
It was on the stack. That's what happened. I was like, wow, I didn't even get a chance to see that. Watery Grave and a Duress going to be the first turn play for Canister. Has a couple of choices. Wizard's Retort, 2 dive downs.
And the dive downs are something that you can play around. And yeah, I think that we're going to see the retort go to the graveyard here.
Island is the draw for Burchett. Siren Stormtamer will get in for 1. Drowned Catacomb is the draw for Canister. Trying to decide between Hallowed Fountain and Godless Shrine. Hallowed Fountain will come into play tapped.
And we're going to see the Trickster come down.
Kabam!
Crucially, Burchett is without a Curious Obsession this game. Ooh, the Stormhammer is actually a fairly important card because it does give Autumn a way that is not a spell from hand to protect your creatures in the event of a Teferi coming down.
All right, Island.
But the Stormtamer does, is at risk to Deputy Detention, but thankfully for Burchett, there are 2 dive downs.
Yes. Deputy Detention goes onto the stack. Burchett has to let it go. Siren Stormtamer is targeted. Dive down in response to the enter the battlefield trigger on the affected Siren Stormtamer. Spell Pierce is the draw for Burchett.
It's a pretty good draw, actually. It does prevent a Teferi from coming down, but interestingly, the Elite Guard Mage from Canister here is going to be huge.
It's going to do a lot of work.
This is a absolutely enormous blocker against these 1/1 flyers. Gets him an extra card, brick walls, both of these flyers. Gains a little bit of life too.
Yeah, I was about to say that life gain sets Burchett back almost a whole turn in terms of trying to get Canister's life total down to 0. Hero Precinct 1 going to hit the battlefield after Duress is drawn for Canister. Godless Shrine. He's going to shock himself and get that Teferi on the stack, but Spell Pierce is going to have something to say about that.
How many spells are in the yard? It's 3 for the Terramander. So still a couple spells / lands away from adapting that Terramander.
Here comes a main phase opt. Going to go to the bottom, draw Disdainful Stroke, which...
That's real bad right now.
Yeah, it's not going to stop Teferi Time Raveler next turn. And so will be turned off. Canister considering the Duress here.
I think leading with Duress gives you Teferi that is unanswered effectively. But if you Duress, you may need to Teferi and bounce Terramander because otherwise it just gets to come down. It just gets to become a 5/5, right?
That is correct. Yes.
Be 5 in the yard, so yeah, 6, 7.
All right, Duress is going to go on the stack. Autumn has the chance to respond with a dive down if they would like, and the Disdainful Stroke would get taken.
Yeah, probably not going to dive down, just sort of willy-nilly here.
Seems very unlikely. But again, as you mentioned, getting those instant sorceries in the graveyard, maybe a consideration here.
It is, yeah. That's one thing that you may be thinking about. You can always just sort of cast the dive down at another point. You can even leave the dive down up if your opponent doesn't take it to sort of protect your Terramander if you do draw a land as well.
So if you're in Canister's seat, you're not really concerned about either of these cards, right?
Okay, let's take the Disdainful Stroke. With Teferi, yeah, you're feeling pretty good just getting your Teferi into play, and I wouldn't be surprised to just see Teferi tick up even to make it a 5/5. Then you're still vulnerable to the Terramander, though. So maybe it is just the Teferi into bounce Terramander, which is one of the reasons that I think Autumn is thinking, do I just want to dive down this?
Yeah, while it's on the
If
stack.
I dive down this right now, then I can
Turn it
use
into a
next,
5/5,
right?
yeah.
But that could potentially just get bounced next turn if your opponent just ticks up. So there's not really a great opportunity here.
That Elite
for
Guard
Autumn.
Mage prove very, very useful for Canister in the 60 here.
Right. Yeah, Guard Mage has been huge. We were talking about how, it's a very unusual inclusion. But yeah, Burchett does go with the dive down to stop the Teferi bounce, which guarantees an opportunity to adapt that next turn and at least eat the Guard Mage, if not kill Teferi. And then with the pair of Storm Tamers in play, now, okay, well, I have these sort of as insurance for that Terramander as well.
All right, it looks like Teferi is going to bounce the Deputy of Detention and
like
go
this a
for the
lot.
Siren Storm Tamers next turn. Island is the draw for Autumn Burchett. Not going to be of much help here.
I would expect we see, well, it's interesting. We could see both Siren Storm Tamers attack Teferi, Terramander attack face. You're guaranteed to kill Teferi, but then you only have one Storm Tamer and you don't really have insurance. But you kind of want to kill this Teferi.
Yeah.
Because if that Teferi stays in play, you have a lot of dead draws.
So let's see what Burchett is going to do here. One attacker, it's the Terramander.
And it's going to maybe just induce a chump block. Okay, yeah, you're not really worried about that yet because of the texture of your hand. You're getting the chump block from the Guard Mage, not wasting a Storm Tamer to ensure you get this killed now anyway. You know there's a Deputy Detention too, so you want to ensure that you have the sort of duplicate
Insurance. As
insurance
it were.
against... Yep. Crunch.
There goes Elite Guard Mage straight to the graveyard due to damage. Thought Erasure not going to do very much good here unless Canister just wants to surveil.
There's Teferi.
Oh, that's right.
You can tick
the
up your
move of
Teferi.
tick up, yeah.
So it may look like a weak draw, but ticking up Teferi and Thought Erasuring allows you to take your opponent's card during their draw step, and they have no opportunity to play it.
Pretty big deal here. We're going to see another token get generated by Hero of Precinct 1. Deputy of Detention going to target that Terramander. And I believe we will see Siren Storm Tamer activation from Burchett to prevent that from happening. Teferi is, I assume, going to get activated for this Thought Erasure play on Autumn's draw step.
I wonder if there's an attack here. You know, for Piotr.
I'll protect you.
Yeah, maybe not. Doesn't want to trade the Hero of Precinct 1 for Trickster, and he'd just be trading token for 1 damage now.
Yeah. That Hero of Precinct 1, I think, is too important right now.
Okay, so it's going to allow Autumn to draw their card.
All
And
right.
then
It's a
Thought
Spell
Erasure.
Pierce.
Not a super high impact card in general, but we do get that because of the lockdown from Teferi. There's no opportunity to even Spell Pierce this, so Canister even gets a Surveil.
Isolated Chapel
Good.
straight
Gets,
to the
gets
graveyard.
that out of the way. You know, so if it weren't for Teferi's passive effect, Burchett could have at least Spell Pierced that and prevented the Surveil, which would have meant Canister was drawing a dead card for at least a turn.
If I had to guess, I'd say the Terramander is probably going to hit that Teferi.
Well,
But Piotr is at 13.
13 life. You know, like there's just so many creatures in play right now. If you attack for 6, then attack for it's interesting. You have the Storm Tamer. I actually think the Terramander and Storm Tamer going face, it's not quite a 2-turn clock, but it's a 3-turn clock. Okay,
Going to diversify the threats here a little bit.
This prevents Canister from taking up his Teferi in time to bounce the Terramander or the Storm Tamer to prevent this sort of 3-turn clock anyway.
Right. Meaning it demands an answer from hand, but of course the Thought Erasure draw from Canister means that the same thing is going to happen.
Yep.
We're going to see a draw step immediately followed by a Thought Erasure. All right. Going for it.
Everyone's in there. No, not the Deputy. Yeah, I definitely need to hold something back to stop the Merfolk Trickster. If there's a trade here, you get 4 in. That's going to eat 1.
All right, so it looks like it's going to be 5 in. Autumn down to 15.
Well, this actually gives, I was going to say gives Autumn a draw, but there's no draw because of the Thought Erasure.
Of course, not going to be able to take that island that Autumn drew.
Right. And
John Catacomb
surveil
going
again.
to go straight to the graveyard. Canister says, I've got enough lands. Let's see what else is on top. No reason not to play the island here.
Yeah, now Autumn gets to attack with both at the face.
Well, it's a 2-turn clock with Terramander no matter what, right?
Sure, yeah. Or 1 and 1. Yeah. Although both at the face does give you a, if your opponent, I guess there's no real.
Oh, what a draw.
I was, so the Guard Mage is so huge here.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And also gains 3 life and a Finale of Eternity.
Finale of Eternity.
Oh my God.
It can't kill, well, it can't kill the Terramander, and it's actually, it's actually countered by Siren Storm Tamer. Right? So the finale looks big, but actually is...
Destroy up to 3 target creatures. So it'll get the Trickster and the Storm Tamer.
We'll get countered by the Storm Tamer.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
Right?
Here goes nothing.
Because the Storm Tamer just straight up counters it.
Yes. Yes. Counter target spell or ability, the whole spell that targets you or a creature you control. Right.
Yeah, it's a really interesting game here. Oh, these elite guard mages have been so good for Canister.
I mean, great utility creature, protects from flyers, great for this matchup in particular. Gonna send with the hero and all of the little tokens there. Although here's the thing, Burchett will actually finally get to draw a card without being thought erasured on their draw step. 5 attackers. Canister hovering over the finale here, counting up the mana. See that X looks like 7. Is that right, Kibler? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yep. Once again, just going to eat and take 5 here. It's another Siren Storm Tamer. Wow.
And you know, the Terramander can get blocked this turn, or there could be it could just get through and leave Canister at 1. The second Storm Tamer is actually a very big deal, right?
Yeah.
Because the Terramander, if the Terramander comes in this turn, whether it's blocked or not, it means that Terramander plus a Storm Tamer represents lethal next turn. The second Storm Tamer is very important for stopping the finale of Eternity. So the fact that this was Storm Tamer, and a spell wouldn't do it because of Teferi. This had to be Storm Tamer in order for this to be...
Wow.
In order for this to really be a effective option for Autumn here. A Wizard Retort does nothing, right? Teferi's in play. Storm Tamer does, though.
That activated ability, very potent here in this matchup. Lone Finale of Eternity sitting in Canister's hand that is fully countered by Siren Storm Tamer's ability.
Right, and this Guard Mage, even if it chump blocks the Terramander, well, there's 2 Storm Tamer. I think we're going to see Finale of Eternity probably played... Well, if we play it now, it gets no matter when you play it, it gets countered. So you might as well play it now, right? You're just going to try and kill the Storm Tamers. It's going to get countered by one of these. So now Canister needs to find something. If he has 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He does not have lethal damage. He just has a removal spell. Even the removal spell will get countered by Siren Storm anyway.
Right.
So.
All right. It's a swamp.
I think that's it.
I think that might be game here.
That Storm Tamer draw was so good.
What a vital draw. Insane. Canister considering his options with his lone swamp in hand. Burchett, of course, empty-handed from all that wonderful thought erasuring on their draw step.
And Piotr finds himself in a position just like the one he was in last week, with 1 life facing seemingly insurmountable odds. Last time he had plays, though, now he's a swamp.
A swamp is a type of play, just not the type of play that's going to save you in this situation.
Yeah, looking for anything, but Teferi can only tick up. He has 1 life facing 2 flyers, just the 1 flying blocker. That Elite Guard Mage has done a lot of work.
And it looks like it's going to be a team attack. No, keeping Deputy and Elite Guard Mage back. Maybe trying to bluff something here.
Yep. Autumn's going to make the same play they've made the past few turns.
Down to 5.
Tick up.
Ticks up to Teferi. Ends the turn keeping the swamp in hand, maybe hoping to bluff something. Tempest Djinn is the draw for Burchett. And provided that they attack with both flying creatures, that's the game.
Yeah. What a close game we have here.
And Burchett is going to attack with both the Siren Storm Tamer and the Terramander. That's going to be game. Taking it 2-1 to Autumn Burchett with mono blue tempo.
Congratulations to Autumn Burchett. So exciting. Repping the UK and repping the NB. Love it.
Yeah, I mean that was just a masterclass of the mono blue deck. We saw just a really impressive recognition of like when you need to play defense, when you need to play offense, and frankly that Siren Storm Tamer as a draw. Most of the cards in their deck didn't do anything. Certainly helped out a lot in the end against that finale of eternity. Just ensure you had the final clock.
Absolutely. I love watching Autumn Burchett play mono blue. There's a reason that they're known for this deck, right? The plays that they make are so on point. Correct plays almost every time. It, like you said, it really is a masterclass in figuring out what this deck is supposed to do, what its game plan is, and how you win with it consistently.
Yep.
Absolutely. Well done. All right, we have another video summary of the rest of the Sapphire division, so let's check that out.
Hey everyone, Megan here with the Sapphire division. We had 2 additional matches this week. First up is Jean-Emmanuel Duprat versus Marcio Carvalho. Both had a rough 0-2 start in week 1 and were fighting for their first win of the split this week. Carvalho brought mono red aggro, while Duprat played Izzet Saheeli, a new evolution of Izzet Phoenix decks from standard seasons past that adds, as the name might imply, Saheeli Sublime Artificer, because if you can't find your fancy birds, some weird little robots will do. It was a lot of magic for only about 15 minutes of game time. Carvalho was never able to get the velocity of a really stellar mono-red start, giving Duprat's deck time to shine. And shine it did, like the sun glinting off a horde of gleaming servos. In Game 1, Saheeli's servos did the bulk of the work, though it was a massive crackling drake that finished Carvalho off. In Game 2, Duprat's Murmuring Mystic and Saheeli together made enough tokens to cast a giant bird-shaped shadow over all of Ravnica. Murmuring Mystic was a particular problem all game, since its 5 toughness is the most pure and beautiful gift ever given to those doing the good work of fighting mono red. A finale of promise for Duprat, allowing him to cast Chart a Course and Shock from his graveyard for free and make precisely 1 million tokens, also gave Carvalho an opportunity to finally kill the Mystic and follow up with a Goblin Chain Whirler, who did more damage to the avian population than even that dog from Duck Hunt. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough, and Duprat still took the match. Our other match this week was between Teferi and Teferi. Hold on, sorry. It was actually between Rei Sato and Andrea Mengucci. Sato brought a Bant mid-range deck, which included Teferi, Time Raveler, plus Vivian, Champion of the Wilds, and God Eternal Oketra. They both love creatures, but more importantly, they both love archery, and it's that kind of shared enthusiasm that wins matches of Magic. Mengucci opted for Esper Control, with both 3 mana and 5 mana Teferi. I would say old and new Teferi, but when you're talking about a time mage, you can never really be sure. While historically the matchup would seem to favor Esper Control, God Eternal Oketra was a real boon to Sato's deck, and a thorn in Mengucci's side. Despite a lot of adept maneuvering, Mengucci just couldn't get Sato's Oketra off the board for good in Game 1. He tried a lot of different ways to get rid of it, like exiling it, wrathing it, mortifying it, and hoping that maybe Sato would choose to sacrifice it to the Eldest Reborn. But Mengucci never had the opportunity to hold up the Absorb he had ready to counter Oketra when Sato cast her again. In Game 2, Mengucci never ran out of answers, including to that pesky cat. In one particularly nice sequence, he bounced Oketra back to Sato's hand with Teferi, Time Raveler, and then made him discard her with Thought Erasure. I'm sure it was almost as bad as that time she was murdered by a giant scorpion and made into an evil zombie. Game 3 was a beautiful cat-and-mouse game. It looked bad for Sato since he was stuck on just 2 lands for the first 6 turns of the game, and Mengucci flipped to search for his Kanta before Sato even played a 3rd land. Llanowar Elves and Paradise Druids still gave him room to cast a few spells, and he made the most of what he had, namely a pair of Frilled Mystics. Cautious attacks and conservative play led Sato to victory over Mengucci, who just couldn't quite put together answers in time. And that's everything from Sapphire Division for now. See you next week.
Congratulations on those wins to Jean-Emmanuel Duprat and Rei Sato. Rough week for Mengucci, but I think the real winner of the week would be Megan with the Duck Hunt reference.
That was great.
Yeah, super
Props
solid.
to Megan. Well done.
I was kind of wondering what would be. Was it like bird flu or something? Oh no, it's the dog.
no.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
I was not expecting that.
Absolutely. Now let's do a little recap of what this week has been like with a look at our standings. Here's Sapphire. PVDDR is on top of the heap here without any losses, but has played 1 less game than some of the other players. And, rough week for Mengucci, the Mythic Invitational champion, near the bottom.
Yeah, a lot of these players, obviously still a lot of games left to play over the course of the next few weeks. Marcio Carvalho down there obviously doesn't want to be 0-3, but worth noting, he is one of the competitors in the Magic Online Championship Series that we're going to be swapping to in a bit after this show ends. He's still alive in that event, so still a lot of Magic left to play for him even today.
Absolutely. Can we talk about some of our favorite moments of today? And Brad Nelson's Bant Nexus deck against Yosaoka, the Battle of the Deputies, I think, is my favorite moment of the week. That was just so cool to watch what that card could do, especially when used against itself over and over. And then we saw the Nexus of Fate just keep coming into play.
So which Nexus was your favorite? Was it the first one, second one, third one, fourth one, fifth one, sixth one, seventh one, eighth one, ninth one, or the one that got conceded to?
Mine
was the one that ended the game.
Yeah. That's always a nice one.
Because I wanted it to end at that point.
I think he just kept drawing until he drew the Teferi, which Yasuoka could see, and then it was just a good game. Yeah, concede.
I mean, as much as I wanted to see John Ralph's Planeswalker deck do well, I really liked seeing Brian Brown being rewarded for choosing to include the Elder Spell in his sideboard, because these Planeswalker heavy decks have been very popular, and we saw both the usage there as well as the usage in our first match, where it just accelerated Teferi to an ultimate, just showcasing the power of that very thematic card.
For me, it was honest. It was a lot of different moments, but for me, it was the rise of Vivian and Teferi time buddies. I really think that combination made for some really interesting plays this week. I think their inclusion in decks is really cool, and I'm really looking forward to see how the meta shifts based on those two cards being in a lot of different decks for next week.
In particular, I like the use of the Deputy of Detentions with Vivian. It's like, oh, I'll protect my, I'll like remove your deputy that's trying to remove my thing, and this and that. And it's like all of this kind of that is only made possible by the fact that you do things when you normally can't do things.
Exactly.
Would you say that Vivian is the one who shifted some of these Esper mid-range decks to Bant?
Yeah, Vivian is definitely a very, very powerful card, and I think the more the Esper control decks, right? Because we saw more Esper control last week, and that sort of trailed off. I think in response to the popularity of Teferi Time Raveler, right? When you're playing a deck full of absorbs and things like that, it's like, okay, well, you feel pretty bad when Teferi Time Raveler's in play, and you don't have a great way to deal with it. I think that's a big part of why we saw a lot of players go with more proactive approach, whether it was Bant mid-range, whether it was Esper mid-range, but they're trying to get in the board and do something that can attack Teferi once it comes down anyway.
Yeah, when you can't play anything during your opponent's turn, it's kind of a big hit for the control deck.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's really changed the game in an interesting way. And Guard Mage we saw in that last game didn't almost
so
helped.
Close, so close.
Just, a little not enough in that late game there.
I am someone who loves to see creative deck building and creative card choices rewarded, and that the Guard Mage was nearly enough to stop the onslaught of the Siren Stormtamer and the Terramander, but not quite enough. Maybe needed to have a little higher draft pick in order to win that game.
I mean, I think you got to give it up for brewers like Canister, like John Rolfe this week, really taking some chances, trying to figure out what's going to be a little bit different, what people might not see coming. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how the MPL players line up that Brewers attitude for weeks to come.
Ooh, yeah, stir the pot. Get the brews going. I love a new, interesting deck, so we'll see if those more adventurous players do just that. And, well, they're all adventurous. They're all heroes in my heart. All right, now, I just want to talk about real quick, next weekend is a big weekend if you are climbing up that ladder on Arena, because the top 108 players on Sunday, on the 26th, 128 players are going to be battling it out for the top 16 slots. So they lock off the 128, and then whoever's in the top 16 on May 26th is going to get to play in the next Mythic Championship. That's going to be end of June. Yeah,
it's a Mythic Qualifier weekend that will give players an opportunity to qualify for that Mythic Championship. So if you're one of those players who finished highly in the first couple of sort of seasons on Arena, you have an opportunity to compete in that weekend and maybe get your spot at the Mythic Championship.
Yeah,
notably, it's also the first Mythic Championship on Magic the Gathering Arena.
Yes, it is.
Ooh, very fun, yes. And I think those players that are already working towards being in the top 128, they already know this. They have a calendar and they're crossing off days. So that's going to happen. And stay tuned, because we're going to have a little break after we're done here at the MPL Weekly. And then it's going to go back to coverage of the Magic Online Championship. So that's going to be a lot of fun to see how that continues to play out. Well, friends, it's been such a pleasure. to do this again, and we're going to be back next weekend, of course. And there's going to be 3 more MPL weeklies in this split, and then we'll have a championship.
Wow. Crazy.
Wow, that's it. All right, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you guys next week. Bye.